Hello, good evening and welcome. It's Monday night. It is the 15th of June. My name is Teo Van Dor. I'm the executive producer of Time of the Sixth Sun. In the window below, we have Time of the Sixth Sun's writer, producer, director, Nikki Luna Williams. And our guest this evening is Mr. Mac Macartney, who's joining us. Hello, Mac. Lovely to have you with us again.
Thank you, Teo. Nikki, it's great to be here.
Lovely. So we were just saying before we came on that we use StreamYard for these broadcasts every week, or twice a week on a Monday and a Thursday. And it allows us to broadcast live on our Facebook page, our Facebook group, and also on our YouTube channel at the same time. So we've got a much larger audience than when you joined us last time, Mac, when we were only doing them on the Facebook group. Because the group is private, and obviously the other two platforms are open, so anybody can log in and join us from all over the world. And it really is a global. We see every week, people writing in to say where they're coming in from, and I think the most I counted was like 19 different countries in one live broadcast that we did. Wow. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have you talk to us, Mac. For those people that don't know, Mac actually came to my house in Ashdown Forest and did a talk about this amazing book that he was about to launch, The Children's Fire, that we're going to talk a little bit more about. And we've never had that many people come to a book launch at our house ever, Mac. There was standing room only, 70 people, I think, squeezed into this room on every windowsill, on every bit of floor, and every bit of carpet. And afterwards, I said to Luna, I said, listen, I've met this amazing man. We've got to get him into the docu-series. The movie was already edited by then, but I said, he's a real British elder. I said, we need a British elder in the film. And Luna was like, oh, she said, we're done. We're not putting any more in. I said, no, please, just talk to him. I said, listen to what he has to say. And I said, I guarantee you're going to want to put him into the docu-series. And that was that was it. So Matt was the last addition to the docuseries. So lovely to have you with us. So what I'm going to do just at the beginning, I'm just going to pull up this slide here. So if you want to find out a bit more about Mac, you can go to his website, macmacartney.com. He also runs the Embercombe estate, which you can find out about at embercombe.org. I'll put all the links into the comments. He's on LinkedIn and he's also on Facebook. And all those links are going to go into the description. And as I said, Mac's also got this amazing book, The Children's Fire, which I'm going to put up. We'll talk about this more later on, but he's very kindly offered us a discount. So I think it's £12.99. That's £12.99 usually, and you can get it for like £10, I believe, if you use that code TCF10. But I will put that into the comments as well. So let's go over to you, Luna.
Yeah, well, actually, just before we come to Mac, can we just update everyone on what happened with Kurakindi on Thursday?
Yeah, absolutely. So we put Kurakindi's appeal on the Facebook Live or the YouTube and Facebook Live that we did last Thursday night, and I think the website itself has gone up by like £2,200, which is about $2,600 US, I believe. And we also said that we were going to give 50% of any digital access packages that we sold. And so we've sold, I think, 19 digital access packages since then. So that's another $500 odd that we're going to give. I'll do the maths. And then we had this amazing lady that wanted to gift digital access packages to people that couldn't necessarily afford them. And the post about that is in our Facebook group. So if you're maybe watching this and you'd love the digital access package, but you don't have the means and the funds to do that, it explains how to do that in our Facebook group. So you need to go into the Facebook group and look for that post, and it explains exactly how to do it. But and she's gifted us another $550 towards that. So it's astonishing, the generosity of people towards Kurakindi's, the appeal to help his mother's village and all the villages that have been affected by that oil spillage in the Amazon since April of this year.
And I love that idea of paying it forward, in a generous offer like that. It's fantastic.
Oh, so kind.
Yeah. So welcome back, Mac. Always an absolute pleasure to have you with us. And well, since we last spoke, our entire world has changed, literally. So we've called the talk today, Dreaming Ourselves Awake. And we want to examine at a deeper level what it means to be a dreamer. So on one hand, John Lennon's song, Imagine, has inspired all of us. It touches something very deep inside us. But then on the other hand, I think we've all experienced at school being told off for daydreaming, and it's, with much more negative connotations. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we had been encouraged as children to develop our imaginations, Mac?
Yes, indeed. It would be a joy. It would be like we had crossed one of the greatest thresholds and obstacles to the future that we'd all love to live in. I mean, a life without imagination, a life without the joy of dreaming, is a pretty blunt and rather grey-coloured picture it brings to my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. All these years I've been interviewing Indigenous wisdom keepers, and we're constantly reminded by those cultures how strong their roots are and their oral traditions, and how they can remember back to their ancestral lines. Whereas in the West, we think that we've lost our roots, but that's not exactly true. We have our place in our ancestral line, and nothing can change that. So it's more a matter of not that we've forgotten our roots or that we've lost our roots, but that we've forgotten them, Mac. But, that memory lives on in our cellular memory, in our hearts, in our bones.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really believe so, Nikki. It's, for thousands and thousands of years, we sat together in circles, some of that time around fires. We sang together. We told stories together. We traveled as a tribe together, and to imagine that we've lost all of that, I think is just crazy. For me, the trees and the valleys, the rivers, the mountains, our woodland, and even when we cover them in rather hideously designed cities, underneath is the same truth, and it's always present, and it cannot be erased. And so I feel that she is always reaching out. She is always trying to gather our attention. She's always trying to allow us the opportunities when our hearts open and we cease for a moment to be fixated with whatever it is we imagine to be real, and be touched by the beauty that bore this earth in the first place.
So true. Now, on the flyer, I mentioned how the Romans literally wiped out many of our ancient tribes, and also the Druid nearly wiped out the entire Druid tradition. It's a time in my conversation with you when the British Isles were highly regarded, probably in the same way that we look at Tibet today. And pilgrims would travel for hundreds of miles to come and sit with these teachers on the holy island or holy isle of Mona. And they'd gather to learn from astrologers, pre-scientists, healers, warriors, and dreamers. And it was a sacred place of learning. Now, we know there's no records of that, but there is a thing called tapping into our ancient memory to piece together a picture of how it might have been back then. So I just want to say that today it's not focusing on historical facts, but looking at the life of a dreamer and how that might have been. So do you want to tell us more about that time, Mac, that story that you told us about what happened?
Yes, thank you, Nikki. It was like a revelation to me when I first began to understand and was informed by the Native Americans who taught me that our land was once a land where the people who inhabited it knew it to be sacred, where the information that people would travel hundreds or thousands of miles to come to the Isle of Britain. That wasn't even to Mona, that was to come to Britain, if you like. That Roman legions refused to cross the Channel. So great was the potency of the deep magic and mystery of these islands, because Britain at that time was off the edge of the world. This was of the civilized world, as the Romans called it at that time. Although I rather fancy there were many other civilizations who thought they were fairly important. But anyway, within Europe. So it's extraordinary for us, I think, to think that, because most people who set off on a spiritual journey, from this part of the world at least, head towards Tibet, head towards India, head towards sort of, I don't know, the kahunas of the South Seas, head in almost every direction, except, as it were, that which is under their own feet. And I feel that that's torn, that's a great gaping hole in us, because we cannot see the beauty that is in our own woodland and our own rivers and all our natural places. And that was said to me at that time by one of the elders who taught me, until the day comes that the people of your islands once again return to the woods, the mountains, the streams to pray, we will always be frightened of you, for you see with dead eyes, and your madness may be all it takes to tip the scales. And, you know, it's strong stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're saying, you know, our Earth Mother, as it were, heart bleeds for the absence of her children in so many parts of the world, to appreciate and honor and love and tend and care for the earth under their feet.
Mm.
It, you know, just to imagine a land where we once built our houses with the doorways facing east to acknowledge the rising sun. To imagine that in our homes we orchestrate, we set out the contents of the interior of our homes in such a way as to reflect the sacredness we felt in our hearts for the natural world. To understand that this was an animate world we lived in. It wasn't a world where there was full of dead things and human beings, if you like, with this token acknowledgement of animals. I suspect we were like the Lakota in the old, very old dialects, where there was no word for animal, even. No word for animal, because they're our brothers, our sisters, their family. And this is the world, I think, that inside we long for, where everything speaks to us, because that world still is speaking, but we have our ears blocked. Yes. So, but the moment we begin to turn, the moment we begin to pay attention, the moment we create enough space, then all kinds of beautiful, beautiful things begin to be revealed, and we become more tender, more gentle, more open, and we'll probably cry a bit, but we'll also smile. Very beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So going back to the Holy Island, as it's known now, which is by Anglesey, and it used to be known as Mona, I believe there was a temple there, a monastery or a temple, which was a place of learning. And in several texts, I've seen that there were dreamers there. So if we imagine, whether it's, you know, in the ancient past of Lemuria or back in the days of the Queen Boudica at the end of the Iron Age, I have a strong sense that there were dreamers, and it was a proper job, a skill that people had. So this conversation is all about opening up our imagination. So the art of a dreamer, I imagine they would have learned to, or were taught to meditate, maybe to remote view in a way as we understand it today, to shapeshift like the shamans, to do lucid dreaming, and to study the shamanic arts, the ritual and the alchemy of the shamanic arts. So what skills do you think it would take to be a dreamer, Mac?
Well, you know, the very first one, which I feel even now within so many different circles where these things are taught and are sought to remember, the very first is just time in nature, you know, because I meet many people who will spend many hundreds of hours at workshops and reading books and all these other things, but time in nature. Time, I mean, big time in nature.
Yeah.
Because we are so separated. Now, there are many of us who have gardens, but how do we garden? You know, do we understand that this is a shrine that we are working with? Do we understand that it is hubris to say that we are the gardener and we're gardening the garden? No, we are the gardened. The plants, the earth, the rain, the soil, the sun are stroking us, bathing us, holding us firm, filling us with their beauty. When we approach our gardens, it's just as an example, when we approach our gardens in that way, in that sort of deep, loving way, even if let's say we're not feeling loving, but that is it's just our ache, if you like. We go towards it, looking for that kind of deep, immersive contact. Then I believe she begins to, as it were, infiltrate us. The defenses begin to drop. Then what happens? Well, now there are many, many different forms of dreaming. And to be honest, you know, like lucid dreaming is given an enormous pedestal upon which it stands. But there are many kinds of dreaming, many of which do not necessitate being asleep, if you see what I mean. All this wonderful, what we call world of daydreams, this wonderful world of you're standing there, you're feeling something, and the tool, let's say, that's in your hand in the garden, sort of nerve just drops out of your hand onto the ground as you sink deeper. Suddenly bird song is coming more and more louder into you. Suddenly your breathing begins to deepen. Suddenly all kinds of things begin to happen to you. You are being blessed, is what I would say. Mm-hmm. And then it just keeps happening. So we've got this thing at the moment about forest bathing. But I mean, it does make you chuckle sometimes because, I mean, it's great because perhaps more people will go into forests. But I mean, we've been bathed by forests ever since the world began, you know, and many of us know how great we feel when we go into forest. So spending time in forest, beginning to learn our plants again. I used to deride this whole business of the names of things, thinking I wasn't so bothered about categorizing it within a name and all that business. But I've actually shifted my view, because when you've got a name, you can begin to sort of travel with it, and you can research and you can open things up. And that's another thing, because then it's like we have this separation between science and dreaming, but I think they are all part of the same thing. I, in fact, had a conversation with someone yesterday about astrology, and they admitted to the fact that since it made no scientific sense as far as they could see, they had a lot of difficulty in engaging with it. And I was saying, well, why not simply set yourself this challenge, you know? Go to your reading. Know that you've only supplied the name, the date, the place, time, whatever. And then sit and listen and ask yourself, does this resonate? And if it does resonate, then why not begin to work on the hypothesis that perhaps there's something happening here that you need to pay attention to? Well, for me, it is the same. We wake up and we draw the curtains, you know. We express every night before I go to bed, I step outside our front door, I go under the stars, or if it's raining, just under the little lean-to. Yeah. I lift my arms and I seek to just embrace our earth and just say thank you. I turn them around and behind me, and I'm wrapping them, as it were, in my imagination around the whole world, all peoples, all countries, all animals, all creatures, all birds, all airs, all oceans, all beauty. And then raise them up to the sky, this extraordinary sort of wonder world above us and this spinning planet. And then bring them down to my heart and just say, you know, oh, thank you. Then I go to bed and I sleep and I dream. and something extraordinary happens because I am renewed. Are we not all renewed? Isn't the great pain that some of us suffer from is sleeplessness and the difficulty of not receiving that blessing? So I love, Nikki, to seek to place, to lift, as it were, for view, the ordinary in these things. Because I feel that it's in the ordinary that so many of us, we are blind to the extraordinary beauty and meaningfulness of all these things we call ordinary, because we become infatuated with special gifts or with special people. And that only tells us that we are not very special. Mm-hmm. That if such a thing as sin existed, as it were, that to my mind is a sin against the Creator that gave us birth and allowed us these few years on this earth.
Yeah. What brought it home for me, sorry, Taylor, just to jump in, I remember my mother coming to visit me. I lived in a shed in the woods in the forest here, and she stayed overnight, and I always have that practice of going out and looking at the stars, and she joined me at the sort of stable door that half opens, and she suddenly almost shrieked. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, oh, the stars. And she had lived in London and never really left or gone out of town. And she hadn't seen a starry night like that, because there's no light pollution where we live, for 30 odd years. And she was astounded. And that really brought it home to me of people, living in the cities, just what they're deprived of. Yeah. Sorry, Tay, I just thought I'd jump in with that. Amazing.
No, I'm loving this. But Mac, there will be a lot of people that never heard your original talk that we did last November, and so you've written the book, the Children's Fire, which is about your pilgrimage to and your personal experiences of Mona, which is now known as the Holy Island of Anglesey, and how that fed your sort of dream to seek out the right teachers who would guide you further on your path. So would you, for those people that haven't read the Children's Fire or didn't get to hear you speak in November, just give us sort of a précis of it, and then tell us about your personal experiences on Mona.
So first of all, Theo, I was saying to Nikki a short while ago, I had a whole series of extraordinary events that happened to me. This is after what I consider to be my first initiation, which was when I was very little in the garden. But these happened in the mountains of Snowdonia, these experiences. Really quite very powerful experiences. One of the decisions, because I was part of a small group then that we had, was that we should hold a One Earth gathering. This One Earth gathering, I'm talking now about, by the way, the late 70s, okay, 1980, that sort of time. We stood in a circle, we held hands, we closed our eyes, and we said, where is the One Earth gathering meant to take place? And when we opened our eyes, and we all agreed it was Anglesey. We didn't know much about Anglesey, but so we crossed from Snowdonia over the Menai Straits into Anglesey. Where on Anglesey is the One Earth gathering? And one of our groups said it's over there. So we walked to the northeast little peninsula of Anglesey. Wow. Then we held hands again and said, where within this tiny part of Anglesey is the One Earth gathering? Someone said, it's up that road. So we walk up the road and we end up knocking on the door of this manor house, announcing that we believe that this is the site for the One Earth gathering. And the guy says, what a fabulous idea. Come on in. Now, at the same time, really frightening things happened. I was involved in a car crash. The person who drove their car aimed their car at mine and killed themselves on my car, nearly killed me. She was trying to commit suicide and she succeeded. I was traumatized by that experience. Immediately after, I found this space within that manor house, an empty oval-shaped walled garden. and knew that I was meant to create a garden there that was a prayer to our Mother Earth. So I start to plant the garden. Meanwhile, we're walking in the mountains, having these incredible journeys and receiving visions and all kinds of extraordinary things. And from that came then the determination to find people who could teach me about everything that I'd never been taught. And the obvious and only choice of that was Indigenous people. And it being also the time in our recent history that it was, the only Indigenous people I knew of, apart from Aboriginal Australians, were Native Americans. And so it was to them that I made that journey. It was them, it was these people who first spoke to me then about Anglesey, about the Isle of Mona, and that did I consider it, as it were, an accident that I had found my way to Mona? Did I consider it an accident that I had created a medicine wheel of a garden? In all our ignorance, and although we did it in a bizarre and probably thoroughly irresponsible way, when we created our first Inipi ceremony, did we realize that that is what we were doing, creating a ceremony? And did we realize that such ceremonies also probably took place in Britain as well? Did I realize that our people were once an earth-loving people? I mean,
wow,
it was just so powerful.
Who were they, these elders?
Sorry?
Who were they, Mac, these elders? How did you come across them?
Oh, that's okay. So
long story.
Well, I'm going to say very quickly because it's exciting, really. We just heard there was a group of Native Americans in Britain one summer. We got so excited, we set off rather randomly trying to find them. There's no internet. We just raced all over the country looking for them. We heard they'd gone. We were devastated. Winter passed, spring arrived. We heard they were back. Now we're like absolutely crazed with, like, we have to find these people. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. So all over the country, we roam again. End of the summer, we hear they've gone. Now we're broken hearted. Third time, spring arrives. We hear they're back. So now it's a military operation. We're a pack of wolves hunting down these people. And we crisscross quartered the whole thing. We devised strategies and we found them.
Wow.
We found them. And by this time, I'd given up with any kind of exploratory comments. And I just said, I wish, I'm asking you to teach me. And they said, well, come up to Scotland. We're holding a ceremony. And let's see where we go from there. And, at the end of that ceremony, this medicine man held his pipe on top of this hill in southern Scotland. A big rainbow went around it, and I was on the ground, intermittently on the ground, weeping and jumping around with joy and happiness. And so it went on.
Wow.
I mean, it was really, really powerful. There are also many other aspects to that story, which, because it's a long one, I mean, that was quite a long time ago and much has happened. But in the end, I do feel there is something about when you, as it were, what's the word? When you relinquish yourself somehow. And give yourselves into the arms of creation, of this life, and almost say, I'm yours, and I my feet are on the ground, and I know that powerful thinking has a place, and I know that powerful action has a place, and I know that powerful feeling has a place. But basically, I'm yours, and I'm ready, and in fact, it is everything that I want. And I think all kinds of wonder begins to happen. And of course, you have to walk through the weather. You have to walk through the times where there's no rain and or it's searing heat and there's not much on the table and all the rest of it. But I think that, just to go back for a moment, that is what gave me the greatest joy. I realized back into this life, the animate world that I believe was lost. And just today, and for the last few weeks, I take my little boy, we go to the cabin, there's my Robin. Now he sat on my little boy's hand, he's 3 years old. He eats food from my little boy's hand. He comes 16 times. And my little boy is transfixed. And obviously he's knowing and understanding this little Robin is his friend. And we've done the same. We're doing trees. He can identify, and he knows we're walking along the road. He knows the names of these plants. He knows some of the qualities of the plants. He can recognize different trees. And all I'm really trying to do, I'm not wanting him to become an encyclopedia of facts about our world. I just want him to feel that it is a known world and that he is welcome. So when I said to him today, he said, "Where are you going, Dada?" I said, "I'm going into that big cloud you can see behind us." And he said, "Wow." He said, "Going into the cloud?" You seem a little bit anxious. I said, "Yes, behind that cloud is the mountain on Dartmoor, or the hills, and that's where I'm going." So, but I can see already his little face has changed. He's glowing a little bit. It's filled with all sorts of images of wonder. And he said, "Who's in the cloud?" I said, "It's a wonderful man called Nigel who makes music with a flute." "Wow, can I come?" "Of course you can. Yes, not today, but of course you can." And we'll go there. And there's a wonderful stream there with tadpoles and all sorts of things. Now he's, this is what our earth is saying to us. This is what our earth is saying to us all the time. Yeah. It's like
dreaming.
Yeah.
Matt, where did you set off from when you were making your pilgrimage to Anglesey? I'm just because a lot of our viewers are from around the world and want to have a clue where Anglesey is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up this window here and share that with people so people can see it. So this is the United Kingdom, and so London would be here, and this is Ireland over here. But here you can see these are the mountains of Snowdonia that Mac was talking about, and the island of Anglesey actually sits right at the top left of that. So the island of Anglesey is known now. That would be the Isle of Mona. So if I jump back, that's sort of here, right here on the top northwest of Wales. So for our viewers around the world, this is England, this is Wales, and then at the top you've got Scotland and Ireland, and that is what now makes up the United Kingdom. That back then, in the time of the Romans, would have been called Britain.
So if you, I don't know if you want to, but if you put your arrow, you ask me where did I travel from.
Oh, yeah.
You get the map back up.
Yeah. Just jump back in there. Yes.
And you just locate Bristol.
Bristol down here. And
then go north. Keep going up to the Malvern Hills. Can you see them up there somewhere?
Yeah, Malvern Hills here. Outstanding beauty.
That's where I was born.
Okay.
And I thought, what a wonderful place to start that journey from where I was born to the Isle of Mona, but traveling without a map and without a compass, using only the stars and the sun, to travel in deep winter in the time of dreaming, when I could really feel my way into this land, to travel without a tent because I want the sky above me, and to travel with only wild food, which I had gathered and processed myself, like acorns and leaching out the tannins. And then to feel my way through the mountains and along the river valleys, all the time seeking to use what I've been taught to go as deep as I could into the memory of our land and the stories of our people. I'm carrying the kindling for the next fire stuffed down the front of my trousers. Because I couldn't be sure that I'd find anywhere. My biggest problem, no water, because it's all frozen. It was very cold winter. I was perpetually cold, but in my heart just singing with joy, because this was a feeling, you see. Here we are 2,000 years later, as it were, and a bit more, since AD 60, when Boudica lost her final battle. Mm. Here is a man hardly in the first flush of youth, you know, just about to go into what could only be called old age, or something close to it, as it were, you know, walking this journey and reclaiming this land for the goddess, basically, saying, you know, we were laid down, but we were not defeated. We can dream our way to a different way of living. We can re-dream what civilization means. We can become trusted parents and uncles and aunts and grandparents of our children. We can seek again to knit all the ties of true kinship with everything else that is living on this planet, and that which we no longer call living, but it does indeed also have a place: water, rocks, air. It was, and you know, I'm one, but there are many, 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 many people out there who are surfacing with the same dream, with the same feelings, or versions of it. Yes. And I think is one of our one of the things that makes me feel, ooh, maybe.
So, Mac, I want to keep jumping backwards and forwards, getting a feeling for that time, a feeling of the dreamers, a feeling of how we can use that in contemporary times. So can you tell me that story again? When we were at Teo's house, and also in interview, you've told us that story. But for those people who haven't heard it, what the teachers said to you, they asked you a question. And the way it was asked, you know what I'm talking about, the tribes. Mm. Because that opened up a whole world of inquiry for me since I heard you first say that. Mm. So what did they say to you?
They said, Mac, we understand that you're educated. I said, well, I went to school. And he said, good. And we understand that you studied history. I said, well, I was present in the classroom. They said, so we're going to ask you a question. And we are going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that you are going to answer this intelligently and with some good information. So, name your tribes. My tribes? Well, we don't really have expletives from the Native Americans. Name your tribes. Now suddenly, and I don't know why, but I'm beginning to feel quite upset. I've got hair on the back of my neck just beginning to prickle. There's something distant and something ancient, something thrilling and something terrifying rising. And they said, you don't know the names of your tribes. You have no names for the shoulders of the people upon that you stand on. All the freedoms that have been won for you over hundreds and hundreds of years. You do not know these people. And then one of them, another one, stood up and facing me said, Coritani, Ordovici, Atrebates, Trinovantes, Brigantes, Dumnonii, Silures, on and on, 20 of our tribes. They said, you were once an earth-honoring people. You need to do some work. You need to do some research. You need to start getting curious. How comes we, Native Americans, know the names of your ancient British tribes? I of course, I'm crying by now. They said, because we're curious and ask questions. So I activated my curiosity side and began to ask questions.
Well, it was interesting, and I've said this before, but when we were sitting in Teos and you came out with those tribes, I just had, I think everyone did, full goosebumps all over. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it just started to evoke these ancient feelings. Mm. And I was shocked because there were 60, 70 people in that room, Teo, who all are bright people seeking what is out there. They're seekers. Yeah. And apart from the names of one or two tribes, none of us knew the names of our ancient tribes. So when I came home, I went on to Google, and there it all is. That's right. A map of England, where they come from. I mean, it is all there. So I've really come to question what this veil of amnesia is, that we have no roots, or we've forgotten our roots. We really have amnesia about it.
And you know, the other thing, Nikki, I mean, the names that we once had.
Yes.
You know, as we know, Boudica, I mean, bringer of victory. We've got Cartimandur, that meant sleek pony. All these wonderful, rich, nature-based names. You know, we used to carry them. We weren't in the position we are now, where sometimes we're given those names and either feel rather embarrassed about them or hold them up in front. But you know what I mean? It's different. We inhabited those names, and they spoke to us in the same way about our essential gifts, and we were kin. We were kin. We were kin and kin. Mm.
Mac, something that really stood out to me that I'd never understood before when we spoke was about when you talked about what the Roman invasion did across not just England and Great Britain, but also across the whole of Europe. And it was suddenly because it was like being half English and half Dutch, and and what my ancestors on both sides have probably done around the world. I'd always had that feeling of, that there's the atrocities have happened by these different countries. Look at this, the Spanish in South America, the English in North America, what the Dutch did in South Africa and in Australia, around the world, and and many other nations as well. But it was when you gave us that explanation that it was almost like big brother beating up little brother, and the little brother going and meeting it out across the world. Would you just share that?
Yeah. You see, it's been a story that's been promulgated through so many histories up until relatively recently, that Rome's arrival in Europe and Britain was a godsend. That we were a barbaric, general collection of fairly barbaric peoples who had no culture, basically, and were just boozing and fighting, sort of thing. It's in the last few decades, suddenly this picture is beginning to clear, and it's a very, very far from the truth. We were sophisticated people in all kinds of ways, and so when Rome began to expand its empire, of course, it had a massive impact on all the countries into which it went, but it carried with it the seduction of the economy that we have today. In other words, it carried all these trade opportunities, all these wonderful and rather exotic goods and things that we peoples hadn't had. And so, to varying degrees, different peoples, allowed them entry, and so things began to shift. The thing about Britain is that probably because the Druids had moved from Chartres in France to the Isle of Mona into Britain, because it was so strong as a sort of a way, a part of our culture. But I have to say, not only in Britain, but we're also an island protected by water, all those things.
Yeah.
They met unprecedented resistance in Britain. So we had, I can't remember, something like double the number of legions in Britain to try and subjugate the local population, which mostly gathered in a line between Exeter and Hull, a sort of a line traveling from the southwest to the northeast, splitting the country, the sort of civilized or semi-civilized part of Britain and the Wild West, as it were. The resistance that was put up was so great and so persistent and so prolonged that, of course, like in a siege, the forces holding the siege, anger and resentment and all these things build, so that when finally Boudica's last revolt was put down, then the killing began. And of course, we don't have factual evidence of the numbers and everything, but all the suggestions are that the Ordovici were virtually wiped out, that the Iceni were virtually wiped out, that the Silures were virtually wiped out. And even those tribes which were not wiped out, I mean, atrocities went on across the island, so great that Rome called that general back. And for something to shock Rome needed to be really, truly horrific. They called it back. So my own belief, and this is not also to diminish the suffering that happened, as it were, in Spain and Holland and Netherlands and all these other countries, and Gaul, France, and all this, because it was awful. Accounts of Caesar killing the Helvetii tribe, which numbered hundreds of thousands dead in one battle, not machine gun bullets, hacks and thrusts from swords and spears. That's appalling. My theory is that this trauma that happened in Britain at that time was truly like a great lesion across our cultural memory. And I believe that a little bit like some abused children, we grew up, we took it inside of ourselves, and then we unleashed it later around the world, as indeed, as you've said, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and so on.
Days of empire.
Yes, and we just spread it. And the thing is, we still, of course, are, but now it's held largely within a corporate mindset, which is not to put all of the guilt on the corporates, because it's just the whole way that we define society now is extractive, is basically seeing everything as a resource to be used. And so many of the indigenous peoples, as we know, are still suffering, not least in many places, but all in South America, and most notably the appalling things happening in Brazil and other places, because we still have the same thing happening.
Yeah.
So we talk about that in our docuseries. The second episode is about our healing our ancestral wounds. And so really, we also are wounded from nearly being wiped out, as you've just said. And we meted that out. So, whatever it is over the ages, whether it was being a Jew during the Holocaust, whether it was being black in the time of apartheid, whatever it is around the world, we all have this unifying wound that triggers us. Yeah. And so, bringing it right up to date, all of this history is in our ancient memory. It's in our cellular structure, literally. Mm. And it's a deep wounding that we all suffered. So what did I want to say about that?
Can I
yes,
add in?
Just to make that point, really.
You see, the first step in that healing is to bring it into conscious appreciation, isn't it? To bring it into the light. To allow, it's ugly and it's frightening, as it were. And what I say about Britain is in no way to excuse what Britain did, but I do feel that most people, most children, treated well, loved, and all the rest of it, will turn out to be pretty decent human beings. But when you traumatize and beat and subjugate and humiliate, in the end, that has to go somewhere. And it either goes internally and tears the person apart, so they're, as it were, self-harming, and, because they often go together, it is projected outwards. So yes, I think it has to be acknowledged, it needs to be addressed, and we need to set ourselves on a conscious journey towards our own healing. And, you know, I don't pretend to know what the detail of that would be, except to say that its implications are massive, because you would radically redesign our education system from nursery to primary to secondary to university and all forms of higher education. You would radically change the objectives of business and turn them into always with social objectives, which are about serving society. You would radically review and appraise all religions and ask whether they were truly, you know, sort of sharing something that is kind, compassionate, good, generous, and all the rest of it. And you would radically appraise parenting and what that looks like. And so it would go on. It's the entire transformation of our human footprint on this earth. And that sounds huge and perhaps so big that it's almost too big. But in the end, each of us is only asked to meet our daily lives, to do it in our own lives, in our own places, in our own way, but do it courageously and do it forever.
Beautiful. With our children. So I just say to anyone, you know, viewers watching that, you know, if you get everyone's come to this conversation not by chance. I always believe that the right people come to the right place at the right time. So, you know, if you find flashes in your body, you know, ancient memories coming up, just to sit with that for coming days and weeks, and just try to feel into it, because I think it's really important, this disconnect we have with anything past, but it's in our bodies. So really important, I think, to remember that. So it's clear that this virus, pandemic, whatever we want to call it, it's forced us into a space, Mac, of deep reflection and a place of releasing and letting go. And it's brought us into a place of being in the void of the great unknown. None of us know what's coming. And that's a very fertile and very exciting place to be. So it's a perfect breeding ground for new thought, visions. And, you know, you, Mac, are a great visionary and pioneer. So can I start by asking you, you told us before about as a child. So for parents with children today, how do you have that grow, the imaginations of your children? How do you cultivate their imaginations?
Well, you know,
through your story as a boy.
Through my story as a boy, my parents introduced us to our garden as a place of wonderment. My mother is the first person. She taught me how to make a little fairy house. Okay. We spent several days making tiny little bed, making a mattress with thistle down, making tiny little sort of windows and doors, baking a tiny little cake. You know, we did all these things together, which was in itself fun. There was so much laughter, so much love in it. And then finally, you know, and I used to lie on my side, peering in through the door at this little magical world that we created. And then, of course, we left this little cake inside, and the following morning it had gone, and there was a sixpence, a little coin, you know.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, everything. So we were mentored, in a say, into the wonder of this. We were given permission as well to take risks, pretty big, pretty important. There was no question about it mattering whether or not we got dirty. We were assumed that we would get absolutely covered in mud and everything, and that was just considered to be normal for a child. We were given a whole section of the garden, which was called the Little Corner, and they said, here you can do anything. And we did.
Wow.
We did. And it was really dangerous, and it was such good fun. But we lived entirely in that world. We tunneled in the ground. We went out there at night, you know, and went down the tunnel system. We melted metal. We made a cannon out of ball bearings and something. I mean, a lot of it was fairly sort of, of that kind. But
who did you shoot, Mac? Who did you shoot?
I shot my dad. Yeah. Poor man. Yes. No, I mean, he was great fun and pretended to be a wild boar when we went on walks. And I used to carry my bow and quiver and arrows. And anyway, when we went for these walks, it didn't take long for me to slip from being on a Sunday afternoon family walk into, deep in the northern forests of North America, and we're stalking something. And I, of course, have some alter ego that is certainly not got a name like Mac Macartney. It's something completely different. And suddenly the wild boar came charging out of a patch of brambles, and without any thought, the arrow out of my bow. And this is with an arrow that's got a nail in the end, which the vicar's gardener who taught me how to make so that it flew properly. Not the pointy end sticking out, but just to weight it. And it hits him, and his third eye smacks.
Wake up call.
He goes down like a sack of potatoes. He's unconscious, twitching on the ground. I mean, it was appalling.
Wow.
And to my eternal discredit, my first thought was, what an amazing shot. I'd say my second thought was, oh, my dad. Anyway, we gathered round him and he came round and it staggered to his feet and muttered something about no more bows and arrows on Sunday afternoon walks. But I mean, he was a very, very good man. And so we had a few rules imposed, but otherwise life continued as normal. I'm going back to that place in a while because I want to walk those paths again. We went to the sea just recently to Gara Rock in South Devon. Amazing cliffs and pounding seas. And I walked that same path when I was 7 years old and saw my dad save somebody from drowning. And I'm walking down now with this little boy and telling him stories of how, I feel that, answer your question, we as adults, if we have received that kind of experience, then we must pass it on. If we haven't, then we must just make the effort to walk blind into it, but trust that we will find our way because life is arranged that way.
Marvelous, marvelous stories. And there's such a power. I've been back to the exact space. I mean, it's been knocked down now, the maternity home in Hampstead where I was born. But I've been back and stood in that place. That's where I was born. And to walk the paths that we have walked and where the stories come from, to sing the prayers in the same places where they held circles. Our ancestors stood in circles and did ritual and prayer. The ground holds that, doesn't it?
I do absolutely do feel that it does. And we can hear it sometimes, and we can feel it, and we can sense it. And even if there is no firm proof, I found a great assistance when we just allow those thoughts to filter through us and feel it, because then our resistances are softened, and again, great things can happen.
Fantastic.
Speaking of great things that happen, Mac, we've talked about your book, The Children's Fire, and did your wish to sort of spread the message of the Children's Fire into the UK businesses and the corporations that you work with, did that come from the time you spent with those Native American tribes? Was that seed planted all the way back then of what could you do to make a difference?
Yeah, they demanded. It wasn't really an invitation, but they demanded that I carry the story and teaching of the Children's Fire into as far and wide as I could particularly into business.
Please
And
share it for those that don't know.
Yeah.
The children's fire.
Yeah.
Yes. Basically, they shared it with me this way. They said, long time ago, our ancestors asked the question, how shall we govern our people? For we were aware as a people that the chiefs, the leaders of our people, over a period of time, even if they had taken their seat as a chief in the first place with all the best of intentions, over a period of time, were quite likely to begin to make decisions which favored rather more the chiefs than they did the people they served. And they said, we believe this is a fairly common thing, easily discovered within most societies around our world. So we said, what can we do to counter this tendency? And as they always did with questions of this kind, they took it out to nature. So we could imagine that council circle breaking up and the women and men that composed it walking out in a great sort of fan out into wild country, carrying this question. Maybe they took time in their own personal ceremonies, walking back, the council reconvening. Maybe it happened many times, but eventually what came out of it was this idea. Every time our council of chiefs, of leaders gather, we will require each individual to take the pledge of the children's fire before they take their seat. And that pledge and that little fire will be kindled at the beginning of every council meeting. So we will sit with that fire burning in the center of the council to remind us of that pledge. And that pledge goes, no law, no decision, no action, nothing of any kind will be permitted to go out from this circle of chiefs that will harm the children. No law, no decision, no action, nothing of any kind will be permitted to go out from this circle of chiefs that will harm the children. Now, and firstly, we have to remember the children. Who are the children? Of course, human children, but also the children, not just this tribe, the children of all tribes, of all peoples. Human children, yes. What about others? Yes. The young of all kind.
Yeah.
In other words, you see, the children's fire really is a pledge to life. That's what it is. It's a pledge to life. People sometimes think it's only to do with children. It's not to do with children. It's to do with everything.
All kingdoms.
Yes. So then we begin, dreaming comes back, because then you say, now let's just spend a little time dreaming about what the impact of that could be. What would happen if, let's say in the UK, in the Houses of Parliament, they had a small symbolic children's fire there, and they all had to take that pledge that they must be able to know. This is not, we think it's unlikely. This is to say that if it's no better than unlikely, we need to spend more time considering it. How will this affect the future of our children? What would have happened with the climate change thing? What would have happened with our water? What would have happened with air pollution? What would have happened with all the sort of depression and mental illness and things? What would happen in the US, if President Trump carried the children's fire? What would happen if Putin carried the children's fire? Bolsonaro carried the children's fire. Actually, it's not easy to sit with any world leader. I should say, actually, for me, at this moment in time, one possible exception, which might be Jacinda Ardern, and maybe there's some others, but who we could say appear to understand this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders need to understand the huge responsibility they carry, and that is the welfare of our earth, not just their nation or people.
Yeah. But you could sow the seed with those people, Mac.
Yes. Well, I really didn't think that they were going to be too keen on hearing about this, but actually it's not proved to be true.
Yes.
It's been quite wonderful and inspiring to see how people in any walk of life respond to the invitation of the Children's Fire.
So you have been into big corporations and who have signed up to the Children's Pledge.
Yes, well, with in many corporations, of course, the big corporates are huge, so it's always, I would say, chunks of them have signed up, but you know, I think in total, in the fullness of it, I have found them to be very receptive, because, of course, in the end, they are mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and all these other things.
Yeah.
The thing is that whether they're in corporations or whether they're in NGOs or whether they are unemployed, overemployed, or whatever they are, most of us will find excuses about why it's somebody else's responsibility and not our own.
Yeah.
And that's the really big thing. We need to forget about who should do it and look in the mirror and say, am I? And that's, of course, where it begins. And yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Matt, would you share the story that you told us the very first time I met you about when you were invited to go and speak at that conference?
Yeah, that was the first business conference.
And the man wanted to shush because he got very uncomfortable. Just share that, because it's like, that's magic.
Yeah, it was the very first business conference I spoke at. I was pretty nervous because, you know, it's the first time I was going to do it. And the guy convening the event was the ex-sustainability director for one of the big oil companies. There were about 400 or 500 people there. And anyway, I got to my feet and I began talking about the Children's Fire and asking them to imagine, you know, what could we do if all the businesses represented in this room were to bring the Children's Fire into the heart of those businesses and take that pledge? What kind of society is it that would not take the Children's Fire pledge? And I was thinking to myself, it's an insane society. It's a society with a death wish, a society tired of life itself. Anyway, I'd spoken. As I completed speaking, a most dense silence just settled in the auditorium, a profound silence. And I thought to myself, this is strong. So I'll just remain quiet and still. And it went on and on and on. And I repeated my question. Can you imagine, or saying, can you imagine what we could do if together we were brave enough to take the pledge of the Children's Fire today and every day following until our lives cease? But anyway, around this point, this very delightful, because he was delightful, guy who was convening the conference, had clearly reached his sort of point of no return. He couldn't help himself. He bounced to his feet. He swung his arm to the left and knocked me by accident back into my chair. He was panicking about his conference. He thought it was going down the pan, basically. He thought, this lunatic who he'd got speaking seemed to be taking it in altogether, a direction
he wasn't comfortable with.
so he speaks to the audience and says, now don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, because soon we'll be doing some important work. And in that moment, a voice rang out from the back of the hall. Why don't you sit down? This room is full of grief and unshed tears. Why don't you sit down and let this silence continue? So now he's peering into of course you can't see anything, it's just light. He's peering and says, well, does everybody think so? Complete silence. He sits down, I stand up. Can you imagine what we could do? What kind of society is it that would not take the pledge of the Children's Fire? And just as a final little piece, some months later, I had a letter from a woman. She was the managing director of a company, and she said, we did it. I just want you to know. I took that home. I took that back to my business. I raised it at board level. We had a big fight. Everybody was upset. They thought I completely lost it. Then they settled down. They began to get excited about the idea. And we reviewed the whole business, everything, all component parts of that business. And I'm glad to say, and very relieved, that we didn't have to completely dismantle the business, but we did make some fairly radical alterations. It would have been nice if all of them wrote back.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so is there an actual pledge that people can sign? I know it's something you take in groups, and it's almost like self-responsibility for people who hear your story. But is there an actual pledge for the Children's Fire? Is that something that could be done? Well, so each individual person can pledge to doing that all their thoughts and motivations will be dependent on that.
I mean, I don't. The wording is that I was given was this. So this, if you're doing it for yourself, then you speak for yourself. You know, this person, this chief, which, by the way, you become in my book when you take this pledge, even though you don't feel perhaps worthy of the name, even though you're only too well aware of all your shortcomings and everything, as most of us are when no one's watching, as it were, when we review who we are. You say, in this life, in everything that I do, I will attempt to honor the principle of the Children's Fire. I will, and that's not a passive thing, because in a sense, the Children's Fire is expressed in the terms of, we will not do this. But if you then turn it round and say, during this life, I will
do this.
Yes. Then you say, then I have to have work that is meaningful work and that is contributing to the unborn generations of human and more than human species. Then you have to say, in my relationships, in my friendships, in my leisure, in the way that I eat, in the way that I hold my land, in the way that I speak, in everything. Then, of course, you'll probably be rather appalled at the size of the thing again, but you realize it's not so difficult to begin. When you have a meal, how do you treat the person serving your meal? When you bump into a stranger, how do you meet them? When you all these little things, as parents, how do we meet our children? And we will fall down. That's the other thing. Of course we'll fall down. Of course we will make mistakes. The only real failure is not getting up again. So you have to get up, you dust yourself off, and you continue your journey.
Beautiful. And that's how we bring it into our present everyday life.
Yes.
The dreaming.
Yes. Because that when we take that pledge, we are dreaming that life, those unlived years, those years that stretch ahead of us, months, weeks, days, or hours. We set it as an intention, and everything becomes meaningful. There is nothing that is not meaningful then. Everything begins to speak to us in a different way.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful thing.
Very
it's
beautiful.
Great and quick recipe to a happy life.
It really is. And in so becoming really a sovereign being, interestingly, you really, I mean, my next question was going to be about, how can we use this art of dreaming? How can we use this conversation to create a future that's more heart-based on this beautiful planet of ours? But you've just given us the answer to that, really.
We haven't taken any questions from our.
I know.
There's 350 people currently watching us around the world across YouTube and the 2 Facebook platforms. So there's been so many beautiful comments coming in. If you've got
any questions,
any question, please write it again, because I can't scroll back and see all of them. But I think Jason's just asked this question here. Let's pull that up. Mac, do you think that England, Angleterre, or Angel Land, will once again become a beacon for nature magic once again?
I think there's a very strong likelihood that it will. But I would say the same of every other country. And that, I think, has to be our dream. Because, you know, when I went to Turkey some years ago, we gave flowers away to the ocean there for the beauty that is the land and the people and all beings of Turkey. When we went to Poland in the early days, under the instruction of my Native American mentors, I carried a blanket and I was instructed to find this very elderly lady who we'd seen in the market in Krakow and give her this gift as a gift to all the grandmothers of Poland who have suffered such intense experiences over the generations, as a thanks to them and to our Mother Earth. And a couple of years later, I did just that with my friend, Polish friend Dorota. Every country I take my dreaming stones to, and I bathe them in the rivers and in the ocean and in every place I can, giving my little bit, if you like.
Tell us about your dreaming stones.
These are my dreaming stones. I have them with me. I took them on to Dartmoor today. My little boy likes one of them in particular, so he calls it his stone. And I keep saying, well, it's my stone until I give it to you. But it does fit rather well in his hand, so I'm working on that. But yes, now I'm British, I live here. And so, yes, I will work along with many others, like a pebble dropped into a still pond, and I'll do my best to make sure that in this land we do that, and that we find our way to make her once again, yes, a beacon, a fire, speaking of this ancient truth. And it's so beautiful, isn't it? Because we can do it even whether we have a garden or not. You know, when we're out in places and we pick up rubbish that we didn't drop, but we do it because it makes it more beautiful. When we thank the trees as we go on our walk, when we lift our eyes to the rain that came after the long dry spell and see how thirstily the trees and the plants and the grasses, when the sunshine splashes across our face or the face of someone we love or place we care for, and we feel the heave in our guts of just that, the loveliness of this earth. You know, it's just, yes, there's only one place really to begin, and that's wherever we are now. And however many of us do that will greatly increase the possibility. And lastly, I'd just say, some people have said and written that Mona and the deep magic that was with Mona, you know, has long since passed. And all I can say is that is not my experience, because I received all these, many of the incredible things that set the course for this whole life on Mona. And so even though she is not necessarily, you know, in the eyes of some, the most beautiful place around, although she is pretty beautiful, but, you know, or Britain. Somebody wrote to me the other day, because I invited them to go back to where they were born and give thanks. And they said, oh, but it's filthy, dirty estate where it's just a horrible place. I said, yes, we did that. But underneath that dirt, it's a river valley. It's a floodplain. It was a forest. You know, she was once beautiful. So you can go back. You can say, I remember you, and I love you, and I will, you know, speak to you in that way. I won't blame you because we dressed you in filth.
Gosh, that's poignant.
It's really beautiful.
So I just want to go back to, before we bring another question up, to what John Lennon said in his song Imagine, that's touched us all so much. To imagine there's no countries, so no borders separating us. It's not hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. For such potent lines. Imagine all the people living life in peace. And here it comes. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. What amazing vision John Lennon had. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. We've had a chance, haven't we, in this time to see what it's like not to go shopping, not to go crazy, and even down to the ownership of the land, as Polly Higgins said, to have guardianship rather than ownership. No need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. So we can imagine a world like this. If we use the muscle memory and access the dreamer in us, we can. So I really hope everyone's got something from today about the art of dreaming and that it sits right here with us. Terry, have you got any
yeah, I'm going to bring this in from Tiggery Pokery.
Oh, hello, Tiggery Pokery.
Thank you for this. I work for a large company that definitely does not think or care. Corporately, I'm sure individuals do care about the future beyond future profits. I decided this morning I can no longer be a part of propping them up. As a result of hearing Mac this evening, I'm now wondering if, rather than storming out and slamming the proverbial door, it might be stronger to write to them and ask them to pledge to the children's fire. Is this something anyone can just do?
Yes, indeed. I'm living proof. I am like everybody, just anyone. You just decide. Do I feel this is the right thing to do? Let's say the answer is yes. Am I willing to do it? The answer is yes, then you do it. But do it, I would say, with grace, if you can. Yes. If you can possibly do it knowing that most of us are surrounded in our workplace and in society in general with people who are frightened, with people who are suffering as well, but people who have, in a sense, just lost connection. Indeed, as all of us have to some degree or other. So do whatever you can to make it easy for them to listen and to take enough time for it to connect. Even if then the invitation is rejected, you might leave knowing that it had slipped behind the defenses and a seed had been sown.
Lovely.
So I'd say absolutely yes, anyone.
And you could also, share the link to this conversation if you really wanted to make that point to people, to have them listen, to have them, you can buy copies of Mac's book and gift them to people. Many, many ways that we can do it.
Yeah.
In the just so people know, in the back of the book is the outline, and it's not the way to set up and do a personal ceremony for the children's fire. But for those for whom it would be helpful, it is set out in a number of stages of how you would prepare, what you would do, and how you would complete.
Lovely. Very good.
The back of the book. It's a beautiful book. If you haven't read this is, we don't promote books on here very often, but this is. I said it the other week. I said it's my top 10 books I've ever read. It's fabulous.
And where is it available, Mac? People? On that word that should not be mentioned?
It is available on there.
Yes, of course. That place, yes. And
after that one. But I'm going to put this link in here because Max very kindly, if you go to, is this your publisher, Practical Inspiration, Mac?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I'm putting this link up now, and if you go to practicalinspiration.com, and then you can use that discount code TCF10. And I think it takes it down from £12.99 to £10, but you'll have to convert that into your individual countries. But if for any reason you can't buy it in your country, because obviously we the three of us are in the United Kingdom, then you can get it on the Amazon website as well. The Children's Fire. Let's just bring this up so that people can see what it looks like. Here we go. Mac Macartney. Practicalinspiration.com/product/the children's-fire. And if you use that code TCF as in the Children's Fire 10, it will give you that that discount on there as well. How do I get this slide to disappear? There we go.
So another book I just want to bring up, it's part of a series of 4, and actually, Mac, you turned me on to this. It's a friend of ours called Manda Scott, Dreaming the Eagle. There are 4 books, and I've got my head engrossed in this one at the moment, but a lot of the stories about our tribes and the Isle of Mona are written. It's a novel, but totally, I said to her the other day that for me it was like, I remember when I read The Mists of Avalon by Caroline Bradley, and I was taken into this world of Glastonbury and Avalon, and it was just mystical and fabulous. Well, this book is the same. So I think it's, we will get Manda onto the show in a few weeks' time. We have been mostly doing people who are in the film, but every now and then we might slip someone else in. So thank you for introducing us to that and to this whole story. It's changed my life, hearing your stories, Mac, in this past year and a half.
When I started reading the first book of the Boudica series, I was a few pages in. I was just thinking, who is this? Who is this woman who's written this book? Because this is not some author who's just picked up the idea and run with it. This is someone who really feels it. Yes. And of course, I find out that that's exactly what happened. An incident with her dog, which suddenly hurled her into having a series of dreams and other experiences, which led her to believe that the ancestors were asking her to write those novels. I mean, they're very special, and she's very special as well.
Yeah, she's fabulous. Can't wait to have her on the show. There is so much information out there.
There are people writing, please, why are we supporting Amazon? And I know that, but unfortunately, it's a great way for authors to get their work out. Yeah. And I think sometimes you've got to, as horrible as it is, you've sometimes got to turn a blind eye to it and think, what's more important, getting the message out to people about the Children's Fire and other books that really make sense, or supporting this, horrendous corporation? But so Joanne has just wrote, well, you could always ask your local bookshop to order it for you, which is, of course, a much nicer way of doing it. And then you're supporting your local business too. So thank you for that, Joanne.
Yeah. And Mac, about dreaming, there's a lovely quote. I can't remember, by Goethe.
Yeah, Johann Goethe.
Thank you.
Yeah, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. And I mean, I think it's part of the invisible laws which guide us somehow, is because everything begins with the dream. I remember one of my teachers once saying that when they were being taught, they were taken up some tall building in a big city, and their teacher said, "Behold the human imagination," as he looked at the city. And of course, it wasn't all beautiful. They're just saying, this is our extraordinary capacity. We can dream sort of things of hellish ugliness. We can dream things of numinous beauty. Make the choice. But everything begins with the dream. And so when we begin, and then, as Goethe says, boldness comes in. Then we have to say, okay, now I take action.
Powerful. I'm just looking at the window. You've given us a window into your magical land behind you. And what's your son's name?
Kai.
Kai's playground, his wondrous playground.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I've had one question come up multiple times. I'm just going to pull this up from Sharon. Mac, what tribe were your Native American teachers? And Sharon also would like to know, how did they feel about you being a Brit, seeking their wisdom?
Yeah. So first of all, we are going back quite a few decades in terms of when I met them. This first group. They were a collection of people from a whole bunch of different tribes. So not just one tribe.
Okay.
And how did they feel? They were wonderful. The thing that really mattered to them was this just a playground for me? Was I just playing, as it were, with all this? Or was it really, really deep in my heart? The next question was, will he stand when we blow at him? You know, or will he just topple over? And then another question, will he persevere? And another question, what will he do with this? Now, I can't go into it now. There are all kinds of stories associated with those original people who taught me. But later on, and a number of years ago, I met Loretta Afraid of Bear Cook, who's a Lakota elder. And she was at the Uplift conference in Uplift Festival in Byron Bay in Australia. And Loretta is a senior elder within her people. And again, you know, I found this wonderful thing. We know the sensitivities of all these things about learning about indigenous wisdom practices and things. But I had always been taught by my Native American elders going all the way back. They said, in the end, Mac, it doesn't matter how many of our ceremonies you participate in. It doesn't matter, you know, how many times you do this and all the rest of it. In the end, you are not what we are. So the best that we can offer you is that we will help you open the doors to your own indigenous past. And then it'll be up to you. Yeah. So Loretta is a very dear friend, as indeed is another woman, Linda, Mohawk, and various other indigenous peoples. But I no longer, I don't create and I don't participate in those ceremonies because they were a gift to me for a specific purpose, which was to come into relationship with my own land and take on the challenge of listening deeply and dreaming deeply and beginning a long, slow road, which will go way beyond my lifetime, of rediscovering our own ceremonies here in this island.
It's a good note to almost end on. What do you think, Teo?
I think so.
Over our 90 minutes, just so beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful.
I'm just putting the link to macmacartney.com and embercombe.org in the comments, and you can also see the link above to the Practical Inspiration website for the Children's Fire. I'll just put it in one more time.
And Embercombe is
videos on replay. The comments don't show up as they do when we're doing them live. So
Embercombe is a community that you founded. How many years ago, Mac?
20 years ago in May 99. I mean,
and that's in Devon.
Yes, it's a centre really, running all kinds of programs and courses and events around bringing nature back into our hearts. Yeah.
Beautiful. So the link to that is up on what Teo's about to bring up for you.
I put it all in the comments so that people can actually click on them, because then they're usable links rather than just images on their screen.
Yep, perfect.
So many beautiful comments coming in from people saying, thank you, Matt. Thank you. You validated what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
My son's name is Zayden. In Celtic, it means little fire.
Wow.
Cool. Lovely. There's so many comments. So Mac, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing with us for your stories. I bet there's many people at home thinking your son is a very lucky boy. I bet many people wish that you were all of our dads. So I wish you were my dad. Thank you. Well, loved it.
I loved it too. Thank you
very much indeed. I really appreciate the invitation to be with you all tonight.
So I'm going to put this out one more time. So for those of you that aren't clicking the links or can't see them, this is what you can type in afterwards. So it's macmacartney.com, embercombe.org. You can find Mac Macartney on LinkedIn and also on Facebook at Macartney Mac. And if you would like to support us and these live broadcasts we do, you can still rent the movie for $4.95. We've got a fantastic 19.5-hour deep dive digital access package. You can make a donation if you'd like us to help with the ongoing cost of doing these live broadcasts for you for free twice a week. And if you can't do any of those things, then please share these videos with others and spread the word about Time of the Sixth Sun, because that really does help us too. And I'm just going to put up our link in the comments now. So if you want to visit the website, because there's lots of people joining us that have never been here before. I can see lots of new names coming in tonight. So there's the link to our website. And if you'd like to support us in any way you can, that would be fantastic. What a fun night. I've absolutely loved it. Thank you.
Me too. You're a star, Mac.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Been lovely.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we will let you know tomorrow who is going to be our guest on Thursday night.
Thursday, 8 p.m. All right. Good night from all of us from now. Bye-bye.
Bye. Mac, stay with us.